Al Bachman thought Sherlock Holmes was a real estate company. When you're dealing with those kind of people, you realize immediately that your party has problems. And one night on Pep Talk, Rich was here, I declared that the remaining 4 candidates in our primary process were aptly named the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Of those 4, I decided to go with the one man I truly believed had the ability to lead America forward on its righteous path, and that was my good friend Newt Gingrich. Newt had everything it took. He had years of congressional experience. He knew how to crack the whip and break that logjam apart in Congress. He also was a historian. He knew things. But it wasn't to be. I spent a lot of time on the campaign trail trying to get Newt the nomination. So did Bubbles. But one night I got a phone call. Yeah. Oh my God. It was Karl Rove. Karl and I used to be very close. Not so much anymore, but we'll get to that later. Karl says to me, Pep, the polls say that Newt can't win. I said, the polls have been wrong before. I seem to remember a certain Harry Truman. He says, forget it, Pep. Don't get that out of here. Get that out of your head. He said, these polls don't lie. Now, there's a very small margin for error. They're really sophisticated now. Nobody likes Newton. I want you to be the man who's going to have to go to Mr. Gingrich and tell him that he's got to drop out of the race. And I said, I could not do that. He says, Pep, I know you love the Republican Party. And I said, damn straight I love the Republican Party. I love the Republican Party more than my own kin. But there's limits to everything. Newt Gingrich is a good friend of mine. And I said, Karl, you know, Newt Gingrich is an intellectual. If you were to look into Newt's head, you know what you'd see? He said, no, I don't know, Pep. What would I say? I said, you would see a swirling vortex of intellectual activity closely resembling what was left of a trailer park in a Texas Twister. He said, yeah, well, that's probably why he's not an adequate candidate. Look at the people we're playing to. Look at the people we're playing to, Pep. He said, you know the old story about the guy who goes to the Texas legislature and he sees a bunch of idiots, which there are probably plenty of down there, and he says, oh my God, I haven't seen such stupid people in my life. One of the old boys walks up to him and he says, you know, you think we're dumb? You should see the people who elect us. Pep, that's the way you gotta think on this. Newt's just too ahead of his time. In fact, 200 years from now, Newt Gingrich is still gonna be ahead of his time. He's just too sophisticated for our voter base. I said, my God, I'm gonna have to think about this, Karl. I was some depressed. You know, I want to tell you something, by the way, boys and girls, about Newt Gingrich before I tell you what happened. A lot of people said that Newt was cold and callous and uncaring. There is nothing further from the truth than that insinuation. Newt Gingrich is one of the most sensitive people I know, and I'm going to tell you a story related to me by my good friend Clarence Thomas that's going to bear me out. Apparently, when Newt was a little boy, his parents heard him crying. He was crying, and he was crying, and he was crying. Oh my God, they thought, and they walked upstairs fearing the worst. In there, they found their little son sitting on the floor with a book in his lap. And they said, Newt, why are you crying? He said, oh, Mama, this book, it's so sad. I said, what book is that? Said, Uncle Tom's Cabin. I said, Uncle Tom's Cabin? It's so sad? Why is it so sad, dude? He says, don't you understand? Simon Legree is dead. That's the kind of man that Newt Gingrich is. A wonderful person. And now I was stuck with a gigantic dilemma. And you know, the people who watch Pep Talk, the people who are my regular audience, and hopefully you will all become regulars, they know that when old Pep is having problems, what does he do? Old Pep gets out his old cell phone and he calls his dad, Red Pepper. And I dial it up and I say, hello? And he said, oh, it's you. Yeah, it's me. He said, what do you want? And I said, I want to. He said, don't try to fool me, Pep. I got to tell you this. You only call when you want something, you know? You only call when you want something. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad, but it's true. You only call me when you want something, and that's the way it is. Maybe if you'd had a different mother, it would be a little bit different, and I knew he was referring to his second wife, Antoinette. She comes from Belgium, but he's always saying she comes from Paris. It's ridiculous. But anyway, he says to me, he said, what's the problem then? You know, I say, look, Red, they want me to stab my best friend in the back. He said, you got friends? I said, yes, I do have friends, Pop, and they don't like Newt. And he said, oh. I said, what do they want you to do? They want me to bring the message to Newt. And he steps out of the campaign. He said, well, son, that's a tough one. He said, you know, you really only have two choices here. You, son, you can wear the world. You can wear the world on your shoulders, or you can hold it in the palms of your hand. You got to make the decision. On your shoulders, and it's a heavy weight, boy, or in the palm of your hands. What are you going to do? But I'll add further. I don't like that Romney guy at all. I said, why not, Pop? He said, would you vote for a guy who wouldn't drink Coca-Cola? I wouldn't vote for a guy who drinks Coca-Cola. And you know what? I'm a lifetime Pepsi drinker. And that's what my dad said to me. And, well, that's what happened in the campaign. We continued the fight for a while. Bubbles, in fact, said, if Newt wants, I'll buy him the election. I will buy him the election because Bubbles McAdoo is the kind of person who never abandons a friend when he's in trouble. The first thing Bubbles McAdoo does when a friend's in trouble is she reaches into her pocket, pulls out her checkbook, and says, how many zeros? But Newt Gingrich is a man of incredible integrity. And he refused. He said, I don't want somebody to buy the election for me. We do not buy elections in the United States of America. Maybe the liberals do. I don't. And so Mitt Romney became the candidate. There was nothing we could do to stop him. And I found myself going to all kinds of meetings while we had to address various problems in the campaign. You know, American politics are rather interesting, as I think you saw in our film presentation. I said one night that probably the only thing that's true in an American political campaign are the bad things one side's saying about the other. Those are the only things that are true. The Democrats are worse, but there are plenty of Republicans, you know, who can play that kind of a game. And people have asked me, Pep, what can we do about it? And I said, nothing. And they said, why, Pep? I said, listen. Speaking the truth in American politics is akin to drinking hemlock. The first person to speak the truth loses. I mean, nobody wants to hear the truth. Who wants to hear the truth? People are always saying, I want to hear the truth. Nobody's ready for the truth. You want to hear the economy's going to get worse and worse? They're going to repossess your house. You'll never afford to put your kid in college? Forget it. And yet everybody goes around saying, I want the truth. But they don't want the truth. They don't want her truth or his truth or your truth. No, they want their truth. That's the truth they want. And that's the truth they demand and they're never going to get. So I started to think, what could we do? What could we do to make it a little better? And it occurred to me, look, if the first person is said to be axiomatic, if the first person who speaks the truth loses an election, stay with me, boys and girls. If the first person to speak the truth loses the election, and you lose an election by getting the fewest votes, it occurred to me that perhaps if we inverted the process and made it so that the person who got the fewest votes lost, then people would consequently speak the truth, because by speaking the truth, they would get the fewest votes and win the election. I thought it was a pretty good idea, you know. I thought it was a very good idea, which had a lot of promise. And you know what? I called up Brad and I said, I got a brilliant idea. He said, what's your brilliant idea? And I said, look, it's a system like this. Nobody in America can dare speak the truth, because if you speak the truth, you lose the election. So let's turn it around that you'll get the fewest votes, and then you'll speak the truth to get the fewest votes and win the election. I mean, can you imagine what it would be like? People would be making speeches and they would say, I cheated my way through college and I'm going to do the same thing in government. I hate football. I can't stand kissing babies. I love sushi, and I'll tell you something, I think stock car racing is a form of mental illness. You know, I think this would really do something to get the American political process functioning on a truthful level. You know, my father said to me, he said, nobody votes anymore anyway, who cares? That's the kind of life I've got up. That's the kind of relationship I have to put up with my own father. It's not fair, but he's my dad. You know, I was brought up on traditional television. Traditional television, that's an interesting thing, you know. I was walking through the streets of this little town with my good friend Dave, who unfortunately is not with us today, not here with us today, and we ran into a woman who was complaining about the difficulties that her son was having with the Spanish language. And I said, you know, I'm no stranger to the tongue of Cervantes, having spent extensive time in Latin America working for Ollie North out of the basement office at the White House. It's a long story. And I said, you know, I could help the boy out, perhaps. And she said, would you? And I said, you know, it's a possibility. Well, I got involved with the kid, and it was pretty tough because the kid wasn't interested in studying. And I realized as I was working along that these kids are trapped in an unbreakable chain of electronic addiction. An unbreakable chain of electronic addiction. What are they going to do? But reading further, I discovered something that was completely unthought of before, and that was the role of television. You probably remember in the old days, everybody said that television was killing the United States. The liberals were everywhere going, ban television, ban television. Television promotes violence and other negative things. It turns out not so. In fact, according to a survey done at MIT, and that's still a pretty good school, it's not Pepperdine by any stretch of the imagination, and of course many liberals teach there, but they still do a fair job. It was determined that traditional television was far more beneficial than anything that could be cranked out on the internet. And that's what I'm doing now, is I'm spending a lot of time down in Washington lobbying to return traditional television to the United States. Shows like Gunsmoke and Bonanza that will impart values and good manners in our youth. And I'm saying this sincerely from my heart. And you You know why, boys and girls? Because if we lose the children, we have no future. This is the greatest country in the world. Do you know that? It's the greatest country in the world. And I want to say something. We all know from listening to the inspirational messages of Reverend Bean on the 8th day, God made America. On the 7th day he rested. It's spoken of in the Bible. But on Monday morning, God was back at work making America. First he made the mountains. Then he made the prairies. Next step, the oceans. They were white with foam. And then he really got down to it. He started to make the shopping malls and the highways and the railways, the ballparks. And it was perfect. And he called it so. This is America. I want to tell you all about it, but we have a lot of problems right now. The biggest problem we have is that the economy has gone nowhere with this administration. I'm going to tell you something. If Romney wins, it'll be just as bad. This is a bad down cycle, and there's just no way out. Do you realize while I'm speaking, boys and girls, that 47,000 families are going to lose their homes to foreclosure? Every hour, 47,000 families lose their homes to foreclosure. It's a terrible thing. It's an absolutely terrible thing, and that's why I want to get out of it. And the way I think I'm going to get out of it is I'm going back to Scotland. You know, Bubbles McAdoo has done a lot of great things for me, and one of the things she did, in a great show of her gratitude, was to buy me this title. It's a Scottish title, and I'm the Laird of Dundeel. Why did she do this? Well, Bubbles was very grateful when Karl Rove and I fixed the election and got her elected Mother of the Year. And to pay me back, she went looking for something special. She was thinking of buying me an NFL franchise to run, a baseball team or something, and then a good friend of ours, Major Mike Longley, who is the cricket editor for the Telegraph, he's a great British conservative thinker and writer, said, you know what, Bubs? If Pep were born in Britain, had he have been born in Britain, undoubtedly Her Majesty would have summoned him to Windsor, said, on your knees, tapped him on the shoulders with a ceremonial sword and said, rise, Sir Preston. He deserves a title. Well, you know, they looked around for a while, and there were slim pickings that season. The only thing they could find for me initially was King of Bulgaria, and I wasn't too excited about being the King of Bulgaria. And then one night, Major Mike calls up, and he says to me, I got it. There is a title available in Scotland, the Laird of Dundeel. It comes with extensive land holdings, a castle, and a distillery. Well, we flew out there and we had to go to a Klan meeting. I'd been to many Klan meetings in the United States, but none of them were like this one. First of all, the color scheme's completely different. You just can't